Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. With that, we move on to the next session titled Reimagining Customer Experiences. And it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce Ritesh Idnani, President, Tech Mahindra Business Process Services. Ritesh, over to you.
Thank you, Ivan. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, based on where you are. My name is Ritesh Idnani. I'm with Tech Mahindra. I drive our business process services, our digital experiences, and our products and platforms business. I'm based in New Jersey. It's about 5:30 in the morning for me, so bright and early. And I wanted to use the next 20 minutes or so to talk to you a little bit about how customer experiences are getting reimagined. Uh, for all of you who might recall, January 2007 was a seminal moment. And one of the key things that happened at that point in time was the launch of the iPhone. And with the launch of the iPhone, one of the things that shifted was how we all viewed customer experience itself. That changed the way the entire world went about. And if I move to the next slide, can you move to the next slide, please? Yes. The market trends from an experiences standpoint has shifted quite a bit. Today, if you look at it from that day in January 2007, when the iPhone was launched, to where we are today, if I look at five key themes that are shaping customer experiences itself, first and foremost, if you view it from the vantage point of the consumers, we are clearly in the world of hyper-personalization, i.e., it's no longer a case of segmenting customers based on typical trends, but really around what you can do from a personalization standpoint, what you can do to market to every individual out there itself. The second thing that I think has also shifted, and I'm sure all of you noticed this as well, is business models of companies have changed as well. We're no longer in a world of just a B2B or a B2C, but increasingly there's a direct to consumer. Every brand is making an effort to build a relationship with the consumer directly, and therefore we are clearly in the world of the elastic enterprise. The third thing that is there, and I was listening into the previous session where everybody was talking in terms of the power of data, and of course much has been said about the fact that data is the new oil. But I think one of the key things that's happened is the fact that we now have an extensible longitudinal book of record that comes in with every interaction that we end up having across different channels. And each of those interactions fuels additional data, which then allows us to form a view of a consumer itself and shape the experience. One of the things that's also happening right now as we speak live, and we're at Tech Mahindra witnessing some of this right at the right from the edges itself, if you will, is the foundational upgrade of the digital economy as we move to a 5G world. And what that is going to do is the ability of the human mind, in some sense, to consume information anytime, anywhere, across channels is going to be critical. Connected channels is going to be the next big thing. And last but not the least, if you take today's day and age, what the pandemic has done, particularly if you take the last 8 to 9 months, is it's shown the world that one event can actually put you back in a fairly meaningful way. And how you respond to it is going to be important. So the importance of resilience and being battle ready always is going to be important to shape experiences and succeed in today's world. So as we look at how the experiences world itself is shaping, I would watch these five themes very closely to what plays out in the marketplace itself. Next slide, please. And the market for customer experiences is growing at a very rapid pace. Today, if you look at it, it's about 140 odd billion, growing at about 11% on a compounded annual basis to about $220 billion. And here I want to just caveat it by saying that there's no single definition of what constitutes the customer experience market itself. People loosely look at just the contact center outsourcing market, but that's a very narrow, myopic view. Increasingly, the market for customer experiences is going to look at this from a broader lens. It's going to include not just what is there on the typical contact center outsourcing side, but it's going to include what you're doing on the customer experience from a analytics perspective, what you're doing from an RPA perspective, what you're doing from an automation standpoint, what you're doing from an experience design perspective at the front end, what you're doing from a brand experience perspective, etc. And if I were to draw this in the context of one industry vertical, let's just take telecom as a case in point. What this could entail is, for instance, you could end up doing a large transformation initiative, which results, for instance, in customer journey redesign at the front end, you could end up, the impact of that customer journey redesign could be a complete redefinition on or an overhaul of the technology stack, including the CRM and the BSS OSS systems that are supporting it. It could result in a reinvention of the way the contact center operations themselves are run and a move towards a digital self-serve portal. And it could result in a significant automation and analytics across the customer journey itself. And all of these are completely reimagining the way a customer experience itself is delivered to a consumer of a telecom operator itself. And that, in my mind, is going to be the new normal as you start looking at this from every industry's vantage point itself. Next slide, please. And that has resulted in one key thing. Experience today, customer experience today is front and center, a boardroom priority. This is no longer a question of whether it needs to be done. The question is more around, if you don't do it, from a survival standpoint, from a relevance perspective, most brands would succeed. And I think what this has resulted in is the fact that we are moving away from what was typically the way consumers used to buy products itself. We used to always have the concept of a unique selling proposition. And the unique selling proposition has now shifted to what we're calling as a unique buying proposition. How is the brand aligned to what the consumer needs are? An experience, therefore, in that context now has three broad elements. Brand experience, i.e., what do consumers use? Behavioral experience, how they consume it. And last but not the least, which is how does this all link up to the book of record, i.e., the longitudinal extensibility of data, and therefore how companies memorialize products, services, consumers, and other sets of information itself. Next slide, please. The market for this, however, is disparate. It's disaggregated. You end up having different players offering different components of these itself. Some people play on the journey redesign. Some people are playing on the data and analytics side. Some people are pure play contact center companies. Some are bringing the technology and the BPO components together. And I think clearly, whoever is able to stitch all of these components together is going to be at a vantage point to shape the customer experience meaningfully and reimagine it. Next slide, please. And the time is now. I mean, every industry and every company within that industry is looking to try and see how they can shape the future of an industry, but shape the future of that industry today. Next Start Now is extremely important, and therefore it's also our buzzword at Tech Mahindra in terms of how we see the future of an industry, but see the ability to deliver that future today to our clients itself. Let's move. Next slide, please. And therefore, in that context, what we have tried to do is we have tried to bring all the different components of what we think constitutes experience. On one hand, you have customer experience coming in from a brand and behavioral experience standpoint. You have the service experience from an experience design perspective. You have physical experience, because it's no longer just about the experience from a brand perspective, but it's also what you touch and feel. When you walk into a store, a retail store, how you end up interacting with the product matters. When you look at a car and look at a car design like maybe what the Tesla has, and as an example, the physical experience matters. The data experience, of course, matters, because you want to make sure that you're able to have that information available at your fingertips when you need it, so that you can make meaningful interactions with the consumers itself. And it has to be tailored to a specific industry. So all of these components have to come together eventually to shape the experience. And this is something that we've tried to do both through a bunch of homegrown products and platforms, as well as a set of acquisitions that we have done to deliver what we are calling as a contextual, human-centered experience itself. Let's move to the next slide. And therefore, the human-centered experience has to touch multiple facets, multiple constituencies. It has to help address the customer, but it also has to help address what the consumer is looking for. It has to help address the organization, the community, the suppliers, the overall brand itself. And it has to touch on different facets, ranging from infrastructure, automation, analytics, etc. And therefore, all of these elements have to come together to deliver what we're calling as a human-centered experience itself. Let's move to the next slide. And how we are trying to do this is we have tried to operationalize this with a proprietary framework which stitches what I talked about earlier, the brand experience, how you buy, the behavioral experience, how you consume, and the book of record, how companies memorialize products, services, consumers, and other information sets. Let me give you a few examples of how we are practically implementing some of this with our customers itself. So that's so as to bring this to life. Let's move to the next slide. And before we get there, the key elements that are going to matter is that the traditional boundaries that existed between front office and back office, as you think about it in the context of a BPO business, are no longer going to be relevant. You are going to be seeing a dissipation of the standard boundaries that existed. A process is going to end up being end-to-end, and customer experience is going to be front and center, driving that transformation itself. Intelligent automation is going to be extremely critical to enable that experience itself and that end-to-end capability. And you want to make sure that that automation capability evolves along the way. So it's not just about RPA or so on and so forth, but as technology evolves, you're going to start seeing capability evolve along the way as well. And human-centered experiences are going to matter because what you do at the front end from a customer design, journey mapping, etc., is going to play a very key role in what you do at the back end. So all of these three components are going to determine how you shape that experience itself. And let me show you with a few examples now in terms of how we're bringing this to life. Next slide, please. So let's take this first example. This is a client based in the Americas. And this was a client that was looking to redefine their entire home mortgage experience itself. For those of you who've looked at taking a mortgage in the Americas itself, the documentation process is extremely painstaking. It can take an enormous amount of time with a lot of paperwork to actually secure a loan itself. And this was a client of ours that was looking to try and shape and redesign that experience itself. What we ended up doing with them is to build a capability which allowed them to have the ability for their consumers to no longer visit a branch when they were looking to secure or take a mortgage itself. The amount of time it now took to actually fill out an application was minutes. What used to take weeks to fund a loan was now a 3-day process. And the net impact of that is this bank has now got the best online mortgage experience that is there. It's no longer about how you ended up shaping that experience through maybe processing a loan faster or so on and so forth, but it ended up resulting in an overall of the entire customer experience itself. And the net impact of that is phenomenal. This particular bank has got a number of awards. In fact, it's rated as the #1 online mortgage experience. 95% of the bank's clients would recommend this from a referral standpoint. And today, they have close to about 9 in 10 clients who are using this application on an ongoing basis. And these are powerful statistics because what you have done through this entire process is overhauled the entire experience itself. Let's move to the next slide. I wanted to give this example more so because this is entirely happened through the duration of the pandemic itself. This is a client of ours in Europe. It's a French luxury goods company. And one of the things that happened with the pandemic is their ability to reach customers through their retail outlets completely diminished, especially with the lockdown. And they needed to engage with their customers digitally even more. One of the things that we ended up doing is to create a mobile-first design. We allowed people to interact with the brand across different channels. And we were able to provide 24/7 support from an ongoing customer service standpoint to ensure that we backed up what was there on the cross-device journeys itself. The net effect of it, ironically, is coming out of the pandemic, this brand has had its highest ever sales In fact, it's 2x. And this is coming through a combination of what you do at the front end in terms of shaping the customer journey, but also in terms of how the contact center is servicing the consumers of this brand through those customer journeys itself. And again, this to me is the ability to stitch and reimagine the customer experience. Let's move to the next slide, please. And I wanted to give you one final example in the telecom space. This is a company that we do work with for the last 15 odd years. We've been the partner of choice for them. In fact, when we started work with them, we initially started running all of their contact center operations. And what we were able to do is this is a client where which was the worst performing operator, and this is all public record. We moved them from the worst performing operator to the best performing operator over the course of about 12 to 16 quarters. But in the process of doing that, we've also overhauled their entire customer journeys. We've moved a significant part of their operations to chat. In fact, more than 40% of the transactions that they process with us is end-to-end, completely automated, frictionless, without any human intervention. And what we've been able to do with them is to reduce the headcount supporting them from a digital self-serve standpoint to half of what it was at the start of the interaction itself. We are also involved in overhauling their entire technology stack as well. And this is, again, an example of what I call as something which is truly end-to-end from a experience standpoint, because it doesn't just touch one facet of the clients, of how we interact with clients, but it's shaping their entire journey itself. And this to me is, again, the power of how customer experiences are going to get more and more reimagined in the future. Finally, to the last slide, please. The market around us is shifting. This is not myopic around just thinking about how are you going to run a contact center and deliver a better service and move to a transaction pricing or an outcome pricing or things like that. They're all important, but that's not the be all and the end all. Experience is a priority. The ability to think of the market in much broader terms and the ability to think about this from an end client standpoint is going to be critical. And therefore, in that context, thinking end to end is going to matter. And it's going to matter not just in any form or fashion, but how do you use technology intelligently in physical as well as digital realms to deliver that experience itself. This to me is the sum total of how we are going to be able to reimagine experiences going forward in the future to ensure that our clients end up having competitive advantage for relevance and survival. Thank you. And with that, I'm open for any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Idnani. That was a wonderful presentation, and thank you for bringing it alive with all relevant examples. I know it's very early in America where you are right now. So on that note, I will wish you a very good morning and wish you and Tech Mahindra Business Process Services the very best going forward. We do not have any questions at this moment. If there are any, we'll send them to you offline.
Thank you, Ron.
Do stay tuned in, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back